A sale is just an exchange of value, basically. And when you can think about it in terms of like, how can I give this person value versus how can I sell them this thing? It's like a whole different frame of mind. I think real estate agents in particular, like they just instinctively know this because you never get paid a dime in real estate until you've already worked for months.
You're listening to the Real Estate Sessions. I'm your host, Bill Risser. Listen in as I interview leaders in our industry, getting their stories and their journeys to the world of real estate. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 244 of the Real Estate Sessions podcast. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for telling a friend. Today, I get to go back to the world of copywriting. I'm walking through this fantasy land. Okay, I'm not a creative writer. I'm not going to go there. But I get to talk to Jessica Swesey. Jessica is a partner at 1000 Watt. If you are not following the gang at 1000 Watt, if you do not subscribe to the blog, head to 1000watt.net right now, pause the podcast, go sign up for this blog, their newsletter. It's just brilliant. And what they're doing now is working with teams and all kinds of great stuff. And I get to talk to Jessica about all that and more. So let's get this thing started. Jessica, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. So happy to be here, Bill. Really excited.
I'm really happy to have you here. I'm going to get this out of the way quickly because I've had guests before say it's embarrassing, but I love copywriters. I love people who know how to write and compel a thought or an action or something from people. I mean, I think that is like a superpower. Am I getting too crazy here with that thought?
I mean, I love to think of myself as a superhero, sure, but yeah, I mean that's really what it is. It's a lot of people don't really know what copywriting is, and it's a type of writing that specifically is trying to persuade someone to do something or feel something. Many times, it's trying to sell someone on an idea or a thing. So.
I think that many people think they're good writers. I hear people all the time talk about that. And then I'll read what they're writing and I'm like, that's kind of like how I write. That's not the same as what Jessica writes or Lauren Walker or other people I know in the business. I've interviewed now probably 4 or 5 people who write professionally. And that's a skill. I just think it's awesome. Is there like a novel or some piece of work sitting inside you someday? I always wonder about that.
Yeah, actually, particularly lately with all this going on in the world, I realized the other day that I really do have this like I totally understand those people who are just like, it just came out of me, like the great American novel or whatever. I have a lot of things inside that actually hurt to keep in there right now. And so I've been writing a lot more just in my own personal Google files. No one ever sees it, but but I write every day. It's a practice I started years ago too. Even if it's just brain dumping for 10 minutes in the morning, I always make it a point to write every day because I think, like anything, if you're an NBA player, like Michael Jordan played basketball every day for hours, even when it was off season. That's what you got to do. So I write every day.
I love that. By the way, I'll sign up now for the advanced copy of the book. So just put me down as one of your first sales. I know you live in the East Bay area, up in the San Francisco. I got to be careful. I live in Tampa Bay, so when I talk about the Bay Area now, there's 2 of them. So you're
I've realized that over the years, like, there's more than one Bay Area.
yeah. And so, first of all, I'm pretty sure you didn't grow up there. Let's talk about where home was as a child.
I moved out here about 20 years ago in the year 2000 from Western Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh, because a lot of people don't know what that means, actually. Very small town. I'm a small town girl, grew up with like 1 or 2 schools in our town. Everybody knew each other, always wanted out. And I graduated from college in 1999. I came and visited my then best friend, who's now my husband, and was just like, fell in love immediately. Was like, oh my gosh, there's no humidity here. There's no winter. The people were, the Bay Area it still had this sort of air of freedom about it, and free thinking, and there was a lot of like just artist community. I moved in with my husband was in art school at the time, and so all of our roommates were also in art school, so that was really cool to just sort of experience that as well. But yeah, transplant.
little bit different than Western Pennsylvania, where every high school football kid's trying to make the NFL, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
That's a little bit different. You went to West Virginia, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Mountaineer. You studied English and creative writing. So you obviously knew early on as someone going into school that this was going to be your future. Now, my guess is you weren't really thinking about working for one of the best creative agencies in the country when it comes to real estate. You were probably thinking about something else. What was your dream job?
Well, actually, I started as an engineering student in school. I was going to be a chemical engineer because that's what my parents wanted me to do. And and I was really good at math and science, won all sorts of awards, was always top in the class. And so that was like, at the time, it was like, oh yes, you have to go into engineering because that's a great field for women right now. And so I studied that for my first 2 years of school and just was miserable. Like I didn't like it at all. I liked coding. I probably should have been a software engineer. I loved coding, but didn't enjoy a lot of the other stuff that came in the engineering track.
Wow.
So I also had this sort of side passion for reading and writing. I actually started writing when I was like 10. I used to write, in a little notebook and just write stories and write diary entries and all kinds of stuff. Started a family newspaper when I was in 4th grade at one of our family holidays. Nice. My sister and I. Yeah. So and I was I was part of the school. I was the editor of the school newspaper too in high school. So it wasn't like a surprising leap. But yeah, I finally just sort of went, I'm not happy doing this and my grades are suffering because of it. So I moved into the English department and started to get more serious about writing.
That's awesome. I mean, so obviously you're super well-rounded. That's pretty cool to have all those skills and all that experience. That's great.
Well, I mean, I don't think I could code anything now, but
true.
Back then, it was pretty simple stuff.
You're in Morgantown for that time at West Virginia. Tell me about, college life in a small town. That had to be pretty cool.
Yeah. Morgantown's a great place. West Virginia itself is amazing. I think a lot of people who've never been there really probably have the wrong idea about it, but it is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to. The mountains are incredible. Our town, like our campus it was basically, looking back on it, it was just preparing me to live in San Francisco later in my life because the hills were very similar, walking to and from class. It's very hilly. Yeah, it was a great place. There were lots of things to do. The school itself was nice because it was big enough that we had, a Big East football team. We had a really good basketball team when I was there. So there was all sorts of fun, big school things going on. But it was small enough that you kind of knew most people, or at least over the course of being there over the years, you knew everyone by the end of it. And you could form relationships with your teachers pretty easily. So I always liked that a lot. Yeah. And it was there that I really got into writing. There were some teachers in particular who encouraged me to attend professional writing workshops in the summertime. And so I did that for a couple of years also.
I think we both, Jeff Turner, right?
Yes. I've known Jeff for a long time.
Yeah. West Virginia native.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that was one of our first things we ever really connected over because.
Yeah. He always goes back and visits family and he loves that camera. And there's some beautiful pictures that come out of, I'm not sure exactly. I think I'm not sure the name of the town. I don't want to butcher it, so we'll let it go. But yeah, my wife and I had the opportunity to drive through West Virginia coming from Durham, North Carolina. We were driving back to Buffalo. So you can imagine kind of the route we took, and just beautiful, beautiful drive. Gorgeous.
Appalachia,
So
yeah.
I agree with you. You get out of school. What do you do first? What was your first gig?
My first job out of college was as a sports writer for the local newspaper in my hometown.
Wow.
Just kind of funny because I never played a sport in my life. Well, no, that's not true. I played softball for a couple summers, like on a summer league when I was in middle school. Other than that, I really was not into sports. It happened to be a job that seemed like I would be able to adapt some skills to at the time. So yeah, I remember getting hired and the sports editor was like, I don't really care that you don't know anything about sports. He's like, I need someone who can put a sentence together and learn it. So I remember going out to a bunch of baseball games with him we had to take our own scorebook, and you basically had to you had to keep track of the entire game. So every move, I don't know if you know anything about baseball scoring, but every move is recorded on this special paper, this ledger. So you know exactly where the ball went, on the third pitch in whatever inning, So I learned all that and was a sports writer for, I think it was about a year. And it was actually really fun. The pay was terrible, but I was living with my mom and just kind of starting out and having fun.
Yeah. No, look, keeping score. Every baseball game I go to, I buy a scorecard at the game.
Mm-hmm.
Every Major League Baseball game, get the free pencil, like a golf pencil. And I always start off each game by keeping score until a no-hitter is broken. Once somebody gets a hit, right, then I put it away.
Then
it's just my thing. And I've never kept score for a no-hitter. Yeah. So, no, I grew up, my mom was the scorekeeper on my little league team. So I'm very aware of, and even if you get very particular, like you were talking about, it had to be like an L for a line drive or an F for a fly ball.
Yep.
Or,
yeah.
I mean, you had to be very specific, and you drew a little line where the ball went.
And draw where it went. Yeah.
That's awesome. Good.
Yeah.
Well, there's a few people listening right now that know exactly what we're talking about. And there's a bunch of others that are like, what are they talking about?
I got pretty good at it. In fact, because I covered the same teams all the time. Sometimes their scorekeepers would consult with me at the end of the game, so we would make sure that we had the same stuff.
Sure. Yep. Same runs, hits, and errors, and a whole thing. I love it. That's awesome. You mentioned though, you come out to the Bay Area, you come out to California, and so when you come out here, is that how you find Inman?
So I had an interesting path when I came out here. So it was the year 2000. So it was the middle of the .com bomb. Right. I missed the boom part and everything was closing. There were no jobs. Rent was stupid cheap at the time, which was great for someone like me just starting out, living with a bunch of roommates. But there just weren't a lot of jobs. Hardly anybody was hiring. So I ended up, my first job here, I worked for a tie-dye t-shirt company in San Francisco.
Very appropriate.
It was actually quite perfect and very memorable. I learned all about tie-dyeing. There's a bunch of different techniques. It's a very soothing and kind of fun activity. We used to dye the shirts, send them off to get silk screened with images of Bob Marley and Grateful Dead and all that stuff. And then they would be sold to all these different stores around San Francisco and different cities. So I did that for a while. And then I got a job for a travel wholesale company, which was basically this company that sold travel packages only in Hawaii, Mexico, and Tahiti destinations to travel agents who then sold them to their customers. And you could see the writing on the wall there. I was there maybe 2 years, and that was when Expedia and some of these other travel companies were starting, and we didn't even have a website. And I just knew this company's not going to be around much longer, even though it had already been around for 20, 30 years at that point. So I was aggressively looking for a job where I could write again. And I came across an ad for Inman in Craigslist. And that's how I ended up at Inman. And at the time, like, I didn't know anything about real estate, but I thought, if I can learn how to score a baseball game, I think I can figure out what mortgages mean and all that stuff. So luckily they thought so too. So they hired me in, when was that? 2002, I want to say. And I worked my way up. Like, I just started as, like, I wrote tiny little stories in the beginning. I filed stuff, I edited, did copy editing. And then I eventually got to, like, the point where I could do real reporting. So I could actually, like, call people on the phone and come up with my own story ideas and stuff like that. And then I ended up being managing editor. And I think when I left, I was VP of content, because I was more involved I was running daily editorial, but I was also giving a lot of content direction for the Connect events too. So
yeah, that's right before I got kind of involved. I mean, I've been reading Inman since about 2003 or 4.
Mm.
You know, I joined the title world in
Oh, okay.
2000. So it took me a little while to find it, but once I did, it became a big resource for me. You happened to share some time at Inman with an amazing crew of people,
Yeah.
I'm going to call it, right? Because you're, as a partner at 1000 Watt, you were there at Inman with Brian, Mark, and
Yes.
Joel at the same time.
Well, it's interesting. Not all four of us were there at the same time, but when I started, Mark was there and Brian was there, and he became the president, like, right after I started. Brian did. And then I think Mark left first a few years later, and then Brian left. And then not long after that, we found Joel, because Joel used to run a blog, The Future of Real Estate Marketing. And I was a big fan.
Right.
And we had a position open. So I thought to myself, man, it'd be great to work with this guy, So I called him up and recruited him basically into the company. And so he and I worked together for a few years before I left. And then, so we sort of passed the baton.
That was a forum with an E.
Yes.
I remember
Forum
reading
with
that
an E.
religiously.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's move this up a little bit. You eventually, Brian and Mark create and form, I think the two of them kind of come up with the idea for 1000 Watt. Is that a fair assessment?
For 1000 Watt. Yes. Brian and Mark started 1000 Watt when I was still at Inman. Joel and I were both still at Inman when they started 1000 Watt. Yeah.
And then, but it doesn't take a whole lot of time in the big picture for Joel to join them. And then you came along just a year or two after that. Is that kind of the right feel?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think they started 1000 Watt in 2007. I left Inman in 2008 and started doing freelance work for them right away. And then Joel joined right around that time too, I want to say. And then I joined in 2012. I think it was 2012. Yeah. 2012.
I've been a fan of 1000 Watt since the day I kind of discovered what it was, right? Because, and once again, for me, it comes back to the writing that comes out of that organization is so good and so top notch, right? I mean, you've seen me retweet almost everything that comes out of there. I love, and I remember talking to Mark about that process. I'd love your take on that process. Like, you just recently had a post come out a day before we recorded this episode. And does that post go through a whole lot of other people? Or, I mean, what's it look like before that thing actually gets put on the blog?
Well, it all starts with point of view, right? So we have never approached the blog as kind of like a content mill or an editorial calendar that has to be filled. We approach it more as, like, we have a point of view. There are certain things we like to talk about. There are certain things we feel we have a duty to talk about. And one of us will come up with an idea. I mean, we have certain goals that we try to write at a certain, pace so that we don't lose people. We don't want to go months without publishing anything. But we don't really like pressure ourselves either to like, okay, we've got to have this Monday post every week, because we've tried that over the years and found that like when we put the point of view higher in the priority chain, like sometimes that doesn't work. So yeah, it's like one of us will pitch an idea that we have for a post and we talk it over with each other. And then it goes through a review of the 4 partners. And then it gets published. But we just, we have a certain voice. We all have our own voices. Obviously, like Mark's post sounds different from mine, sounds different from Brian's or Joel's. But we have this sort of cohesive point of view and voice within our organization too, that, it's not that we can't have differing opinions. It's like we all have to sort of be on board with what we're saying too. And if not on board, then like on board with the idea that like, that's your point of view on this topic. I think we pretty much always fall in line on everything. I don't think we've ever really disagreed. So,
well, it's very interesting to see that dynamic work with the 4 very different people, in backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about, the backgrounds and all that stuff to all come together in this one place. I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
I want to get really specific because I love when either Brian or Mark is on stage. They tend to be on stage a lot. Well, Brian maybe the most,
mm-hmm.
right? And he was at the Inman Connect Now stage. Mark did an interview, which was amazing. And, he was talking about a couple of different projects, right? Because you're working with teams now, where in the past you would kind of focus on companies and brokerages. It could be, a lender or even title companies or definitely real estate brokerages and things, or MLSs even, right? Or associations. You could help them with their messaging.
Yeah. Yep.
But working with teams has to be kind of different. I hope, and tell me, is it, what's the biggest change for you when it's that small a group? Is it how easy it is to get decisions?
Yeah. I mean, it is a little different and it's not.
Okay.
And at the same time, like, I think what we realized when we decided to offer this service to teams was that, well, number one, teams are the future of this industry. But number two, a lot of them are basically functioning like little companies. Like they've got the person who handles marketing, maybe sometimes that's the team lead, sometimes it's somebody else. Like they're very cohesive in how they operate, very much like a company would. And we've worked with companies that are almost as small as a team. We don't always work with just big companies. So I think it's been really gratifying work, because what happens or tends to happen with a team is it's very personal to the team lead. There's usually like a really interesting story in how it all came together. So it's just been really gratifying work because we see that they understand where we're coming from when we bring ideas to the table. And it's usually a perfect fit. So, and I think too, like with teams, they don't have to answer to anybody. Like they are in full control of the direction of the message. And so I think that in some ways makes it a lot easier. In some ways not, because sometimes you can be a little too close to your business and it makes it hard to like hear an outside point of view. But most of the time it's been just really good work. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done with teams so far and excited to work with more going forward.
I want to bring up a specific example. Matt Winsenreed, he's in Madison, Wisconsin, right? And he worked with your team, the company. And I thought it's an amazing website. It's an amazing mark. It's an amazing campaign. I mean, it's just cool. And the tagline or the slogan that was created, your taglines are always so short, but they're so powerful. And this one was sincerely yours. And I thought that was brilliant. So can you talk about that? Is there a way for almost to like, not deconstruct it, but talk about what's that process like talking to Matt and then coming to this or his team as well in coming to this conclusion?
Well, first of all, I can't take credit for that. That was 1,000 watt. We do everything collaboratively, so I don't want to
Sure.
take credit for that tagline in particular. But it is a collaborative thing, right? Like we have a process that we have perfected over the years and adapted to work with teams to make it a little leaner too, to just get right to the meat of it. And I think because we've done this so many times, we can sit with these people for a couple hours, and we usually come away from that meeting with a general sense of where we need to go. It's very rare that we'll leave and just be like, gosh, I don't know, what are we going to do? We just know. It's we get in there and we diagnose or whatever. We know right away which direction we're going to go in. And so with this team in particular, Matt is such a sincere guy that there was another tagline that was in the running that we never even showed to him, but it didn't feel like him, right? And so that's where the sincerely yours came from. He's just super sincere and sweet, and we wanted to keep it really tight to his personality.
I will have a link in the show notes to Matt's website. It's just spectacular. In fact, I'll also put a link to the photo of the billboard that came out of that campaign as well. That by Badger fans. I mean, just really. I mean, that seems like as Midwest as it can be. This is who we are.
Yeah.
Right? It's just beautiful. Yeah. You a couple months ago, you actually got to go hang out with your old boss a little bit virtually with Brad Inman on his podcast, right? With
so
Valerie Garcia. Yeah, it was great. I love one of the lines you brought up where you talked about it was right in the middle of the toughest part of the pandemic, right? We're by no means done with it, but things actually in Florida are not going in the right direction when we record this. But you talked about serving over selling and how important it was during that time. I'm going to guess that serving over selling is something you've believed in for a lot longer than the 3 or 4 months of Corona, COVID-19.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I think has shaped us at 1,000 watt over the years. It's really for us, it's about over delivering. We always try to over deliver. And I think the more I read about sale, I actually have never really worked I've had a few sales jobs, but I'm by no means an expert. But I have become more interested in it over the years because I do believe that copy is just a form of sales in many ways. There's sales copy, of course, but almost all copy is trying to sell you on something, sell you on an idea or a feeling. So I've done a lot of reading, and I've kind of fallen in love with a couple of these older gurus. Jay Abraham is one guy that I just could listen to talk forever. And that's that's an idea that he always talks about. It's not a new idea. It's just when you think about the service, a sale is just an exchange of value, basically. Mm-hmm. And when you can think about it in terms of how can I give this person value versus how can I sell them this thing, it's a whole different frame of mind. I think real estate agents in particular, they just instinctively know this because you never get paid a dime in real estate until you've already worked for months on something and given your time and all this value. But I think during the pandemic, it just became such a moment to really stop and live that. We did that. We did a bunch of free sessions with anybody who just wanted to talk with us for an hour in the beginning because everyone was just so stunned. What do we even do? Or should we be selling right now? And I think the answer was maybe you shouldn't be asking people for money, but you can still provide value by serving them. And when you do that, I think the money comes eventually, as it does in real estate.
Is there one common mistake that you just see over and over and over from either brokerages, teams, or the individual agent about the way they market or the way they deliver their message?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a lack of positioning or a lack of a bold position or a different position. And it's not an easy thing to do, right? But like even as simple as like it always drives me crazy when I get on a broker's website and there's no headline. It's just a picture. And I always think like, man, what a missed opportunity. Like that's like showing up to someone's house and they just open the door and like motion you in that they don't even say, "Hey, how you doing?" Like your headline could be, "Hi, what can I do for you?" Like anything except for nothing. That drives me crazy. And I know that in some cases it's like it might be hard because of the vendor situation or whatever, but it's like, wow, like you really all you need is like a good sentence that's taking the time to think outside of find your home. Like that is a non-position type of headline. That's just very mechanical. So I think that's a mistake. Or yeah, like just not when you don't say anything at all, like you're creating the space for others to come in and say something about you or for you or make their own impression. But when you do say something, even if it's just simple, but it's really you, like people, it's pretty powerful. Like people can come away and be like, wow, that company seems so like down to earth or in touch with what's going on right now, or like helpful or kind of quirky or different, like you can leave an impression with just a few words. And I think that's a missed opportunity.
For those listening to the show, what you just heard, that is 1,000-watt talk. 1,000-watt speak. It's awesome. There's nobody else doing that. Who else is saying that?
I don't know.
This is awesome. So, like, Jessica, I've had you here over the half hour I've asked you your time. So I'm going to give you the last question I've asked all 243 guests before you.
Which is amazing, by the way. You should pat yourself on the back. That is 243 episodes and counting. That's awesome. Good job.
When it's a passion, when I have such a curious nature. I'm passionate about finding out about people. This is not work. This is super fun. So that's probably why it keeps going. What one piece of advice would you give a new agent just getting started?
Okay, so what would I give? Well, first of all, the caveat that I've never worked as an agent. And I realize I don't want to be the type of person who like tries to act like I know better than someone else at doing their job. I've never done this job. So never walked in their shoes, so to speak. But I think, for any profession, really, it's like when you think about the people who succeed the most, it tends to be like the ones who just kept going, right? Like even with your podcast, for example, like how many podcasts have been started over the last 5 years and never made it past the 5th episode because the person like burned out or was like, man, like this, nobody's listening to this, it's taking too long. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to waste time with this anymore. I think it's the same, with real estate. It's the same with writing. Like you have to keep showing up. You just have to keep like you have to be willing to fall down and get back up, fall down and get back up and just keep going. And I think like the best of anybody in any career, it's that person who is willing to do that over and over again.
Jessica, if someone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I would say, I guess, email. I'm pretty responsive on email, jessica@1000watt.net. I'm also on Twitter, Swesey. Those would be my two spots. I don't answer my phone because I get too many spam calls.
Awesome. Jessica, thank you so much for your time. This really was fun. I want to ask one last thing at the end are you cool with people using Grammarly? I mean, are you good with that?
I am, but it does sometimes bring up issues because sometimes good copy is like good copy mimics how we speak, you know? And so it's not always like perfect grammar. And sometimes when you try to shove the perfect grammar into it, it then sounds more mechanical and it doesn't work. So that's when I have an issue with Grammarly. But I do think, yeah, it's great to check some things.
It's helping me cure my passive voice. That's a good
Yeah.
thing,
Oh, that's
right?
good. That's really good. Yeah. That's a problem for a lot of writers. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, it's been really a lot of fun, and really best of luck to you and the whole gang at 1000 Watt. I think
Yeah,
it's,
you
like I
too.
said, I promote that blog every chance I get and say, if you're not reading these people, you're making a massive mistake. So thanks so much for your time.
Oh, we so appreciate that. Thank you so much. I love that.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Sessions podcast. To leave a review or rating, go to ratethispodcast.com/RE sessions. You can also subscribe to the podcast at your favorite podcast listening app. Finally, you can go to therealestatesessions.com and subscribe to our email newsletter and be notified whenever a new episode is released.